Warm welcome to Mr. Alfred Molina.
Find your light, find your light.
So, welcome.
Thank you.
And Francesca was right. You do like to sit on the left.
That's right.
We had a little bet going.
Oh, really?
So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, my pleasure. And can I just say my sincere apologies for not being able to be here for the presentation. So I'm really glad to be here tonight. So thank you.
Well, we're so glad to have you. And if Edith's listening upstairs in 122, hi Edith, in 122, Alfred said again, is there any way the next time I'm in New York for a period of time, may I come and teach at HB?
I mean, I've taught here before, so it's not like I'm just pulling something out of my arse.
Speaking of which, instead of starting with, I'm trying to overcome the James Lipton thing right off the bat.
So is that why you've walked off?
One of the questions you always have to ask an actor are your influences.
Oh my God.
And instead of just asking about your influences, maybe you can tell us about one of your heroes.
Any Brits in the audience?
Not one?
You probably recognise this. For my generation of actors, I'm 62. My generation, we grew up with a lot of TV, a lot of variety programs on TV. And one of the great comic geniuses in England was a man called Tommy Cooper, and his this is wonderful. His sort of trademark was a fez like this, and he had a fez on, and he had longish hair, and his hair was very curly, and it would stick out like this, and that was it, and he would come on stage, and he was a brilliant. He was a clown, really. He did terrible jokes. His shtick was basically bad magic, like magic tricks that would go bad and go wrong, and then he would kind of like justify it somehow. But the truth was because he was actually a very good magician. That's how he could get away with it, because he would finish all these sequences with a really brilliant trick that was you kind of went, oh yeah, of course, It's a bit like Victor Borge, making out like he could play. Right. And I grew up with Tommy Cooper and not with him, but watching him. And so when all my colleagues, when all my classmates at drama school were, I wasn't expecting this, has knocked me out. When all my classmates were kind of talking about, seeing all these great actors doing Miss Julie, and I just saw Hamlet played by so and so and such and such. I was always nodding my head, in agreement, but my heart was actually with Tommy Cooper. I was watching all these great comic geniuses and watching them and learning about timing and spacing, and learning about how to read an audience, how to play an audience, how to ride that wonderful crest when you get a great laugh, and just hearing it and just knowing just when to come in with the next line before it dies complete, just as that crest is wham, and just timing and all that. And I used to watch guys like Tommy, and he would and it was a huge part of my education as an actor, and my one story about Tommy Cooper was as a surprise birthday present, I got taken to see him live in concert, and it was towards the end of his life. He was very ill, and he was a big drinker, so he was he had all the, he was an alcoholic, and he'd lost a little bit of that pace. As a younger man, he was much faster on stage. He'd lost a little bit of that, but he still had this brilliant kind of sense of just being able to play an audience. And we went to see him, and I was like completely entranced. It's a bit like if you're a Sinatra fan, you can see Sinatra. You might have seen Sinatra when he was in his 40s. You might have seen him when he was in his 70s. It didn't really matter. you were just watching this legendary presence. And we went backstage to visit him, and he loved actors. He loved actors, and he was, you know, he came in and we sat down, and I sat with him for about an hour. And at one point in this little meeting, there's a knock on the door, and it's his minder coming in, and he says, "Oh, Tommy, I've got there's a couple of punters outside. They want to say hello. Do you mind?" And he goes, "No, I hear this voice. No, bring him in." And so they came in, and it was, you know, Mr. and Mrs. It was just a very ordinary couple, and they came in and they just sort of said, "Oh, Mr. Cooper, we've been admirers of yours for many years, and we just want to say how much we've enjoyed your work over the years, and it's been a really marvellous treat seeing you here this evening." And they'd run out of conversation by then, and he looked at them and he went, "Have you got an exit line or what?" It was like, just like that. It was brilliant. He just had this. He had. I can't remember who said this originally, but he had funny to give away. I don't know. That's not an original line of mine. I can't remember who said that, but he had funny to give away, and it was just. He was fantastic. So thank you for this.
Oh, you're welcome.
You want to hear one of his jokes?
Sure.
I was having a swim the other day. I was swimming away. I was swimming like that. Or was it like that? No, it was like that because I had the instructions here. And I was swimming away, and there's a bloke in front of me, and he's wearing a tweed jacket, a pair of flannels, a collar and tie, and a trilby. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I'm drowning."
Well done. Has anyone ever seen Tommy Cooper or know who Tommy Cooper is?
Oh, thank God. There won't be anybody saying, "That was shit."
So no. So really, truly, no one in the room has ever seen Tommy Cooper. Now this is fascinating.
He never
traveled.
He never travelled. It's funny because you know, growing up, again, like, you know, watching TV in the 60s and 70s, when I was growing up, and the late 50s even. Who am I kidding? There was a lot of American humour that came up. We saw all the top comedy shows. You know, I mean, I remember the Dick Van Dyke Show was like that was like the highlight of our week in my house. And we saw a lot of, you know, Danny Kaye came over to do concerts, Red Skelton, Red Buttons we saw. I mean, just loads and loads of people came over. I can still remember Red Buttons. I remember he had this. He had that really kind of fast sort of delivery, and I remember one of his jokes. He came on stage. He was at a very famous theatre in London, the London Palladium. And he came on stage. I remember he said, "It's such a great treat to be here, ladies and gentlemen, on this very stage where some of the greatest people in British history have stood. Henry VIII, who stood here once and said, 'Forget the alimony, I've got a better idea.'" And I used to love it. I used to love those. See, it still works. It works. I used to love those guys. I used to love, and that's what I listened to. It was them. It was that sense of that drive. It was the drive. You know, the way that, you know, comedy actors, that there's this need to drive to the next thing. You don't take your moment. You drive, and it's like a fantastic thing. And that's always what. That was what I loved about the performance.
If you get the chance, he's on YouTube. It's very easy to find him. There's sort of a tell-all documentary, the something Tommy Cooper, the untold story, Tommy Cooper, the untold, and the
But watch the clips first. If you're interested, go to YouTube. Just punch in Tommy. Watch the clips first before you, because the documentary makes you feel kind of like, oh,
ugh, creepy. Yeah. But let me know what, because I'm the only other person in the room who has seen a Tommy Cooper skit. So,
well, you want to do one now?
No, I don't want to do one. You did my favorite one.
Oh, good.
Yeah. The only thing you missed was the beginning, the setup of the scuba diving.
Oh yeah, he's scuba diving, not swimming. He was
Yeah.
scuba diving.
Okay,
That's right.
good. Yeah.
I missed it. Yeah.
But
Made me look like an idiot.
But let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you think about this. When I watch him, there's no reason I should be laughing. That's number one. When I watch him, it's like the goofiest, stupidest thing you've ever seen, and yet I'm laughing. Why? I don't know. That was his genius.
Yeah.
And his timing was so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Absolutely. Well, I think that question about when you ask yourself, why is this funny? You know, there's nothing that all these elements shouldn't really be working, shouldn't really be going together. And I think what that speaks to is a kind of the purity of intention of the comedy. That there's a purity about it. You know, there's no irony. It's not observational in any real sense. It's not commenting on anything. It's just that it's clown work, really. And I think his particular skill was that, and that in itself came out of a very old tradition. You know, that goes back to before the Victorian Music Hall and so on. And his props, you know, he had the fairs, and he would wear the fairs, but he'd be in a dinner suit. You know, and you know, so there'd be this kind of odd sort of juxtaposing of that image, and he had like kind of really bad uneven teeth, and he sort of he stumbled over everything, and would constantly look at the audience, and then when he started doing work on TV, he would look into the camera as if he'd just been caught out like a child, you know, and just so you're right. I mean, there's anyone else doing all that stuff. I mean, I've tried to tell Tommy Cooper's jokes without doing an approximation of his voice, and they don't work.
You're hitting on something. You're hitting on something. We sort of touched on it upstairs as well, but you used the word purity, right? Purity. Now, that's of interest to me, especially now, the environment we all are living in. And so I started here in the mid to late 70s. So between the mid to late 70s to 2015, things have changed drastically. And at the moment, I'm going to allude to baseball, because there are guys who and women who love the game of baseball, and to see pure baseball played, it's getting harder and harder, more difficult. You almost have to go to a sandlot to see these kids who are so passionate about what they love, to get to the point where you can see real baseball instead of a corporate version of baseball. What I'm getting at is sort of what we were speaking about upstairs in a way, is that's happening to us as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's you know, as if you think of what we do for a living as some kind of microcosmic view of the world, if we're somehow supposedly representing or reflecting the world, you know, putting a mirror up to nature, then clearly everything we do is changing. We're impacted by all kinds of stresses and influences, you know, sort of physical, political, cultural, moral, whatever. And I think the only kind of purity that actors can aim for is to be pure in that moment when you're working on whatever it is you're working on. You know, so you don't become the actor that says, I don't think my character would say this. You become the actor that says, how would my character say this? Because I think at the moment you put up a barrier between yourself and the material, whatever it might be, you're in a sense creating an impurity. You're putting that material, however good or bad it might be, through a filter that actually shouldn't exist. You know, this is just my opinion. I mean, I'm not espousing any particular philosophy or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I just think it's when I always tell my students, don't ask that question, because that question will lead you nowhere. You know, it's that's what your character says. You know, also, I mean, I think it implies a bit of a disrespect towards the writer. That's just my opinion. You know,
I'm hearing.
I don't want to get on a soapbox about it.
I'm hearing the writers say, yeah. there's no question in my mind, and we've worked together, we've done a film together, we've spoken together a couple of times, but we really don't know each other. You know, we're getting to know each other now.
But somehow I feel terribly close to you.
Thank you.
Especially now after this.
But what was I going to say? Going back to Tommy Cooper for a second, then moving on to Purity. This thing about loving what we do. There's no question he loved what he did.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
totally.
there's no question.
Totally. But you can read that in any performer that is, because I think there's no disconnect between how you feel about what you do and your exercise of it. You know, if that makes sense. You know, the very act of performing, in a sense, means that there must be, or there should be, some kind of emotional connection between you and the material, between you and the moment of whatever it is you're doing. And it doesn't matter whether you're whether you're playing Hedda Gabler or Henry V, or if you're playing a talking refrigerator in a commercial. I really don't think it matters. I don't think there's any differentiate. I used to do this exercise, if I may just. I used to do this exercise with my students, where I'd say, okay, ladies, you've all been cast as Nora. Gentlemen, you've all been cast as, you know, and I'd come up with, you know, some fabulous male role. And then I'd say, hands up if you consider yourself an artist. And of course, all the hands shot up. Then I'd say, okay, ladies, you've just been cast as the dental receptionist in a daytime soap, and you've got one line where you say, are you here for your 3 o'clock? And gentlemen, you've been cast as the guy who delivers the water, and your line is, where do you want the water? Hands up if you're an artist. And it was amazing. People wouldn't put their hands up. And my argument was that's your first mistake.
Exactly.
You don't walk in there kind of going, this is beneath me. Because if you do, you'll not be any good at it. You know, and that's something that I think we're all, and I'm not putting myself above it. I've made that mistake many times in my life. None of us are free of that kind of snobbery. We've all done it. We've all read a script and kind of gone, well, this is a piece of shit. And then you phone up the agent. You know, why are you sending me this? You know, I was in Red last year. You fucker, what are you doing? And you start kind of going. Do I have to remind you how many Tony nominations I've got? You know, we've all done it. We've all done it. But it's an instant. But when you actually think about it, it's not about us. You know, I've always thought of us as actors as being, we're like messengers. We're like, you know, there's a wonderful line in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Paul Freeman's character says, talking about the Ark, he says, it's a transmitter to God. And without, you know, I'm not getting all airy-fairy on you, but I think as actors we are transmitters. We make this, that whatever this gas is, whatever this amorphous thing is, we make it tangible, we make it physical and real and something you can latch onto. And that makes us, we're like messengers. And I always think that if you take yourself to the material rather than drag it to some better version of you, you know, rather than sort of saying, how can I make this look like a nice version of me, rather than actually let all that go and make yourself available to it, whatever that might be. You know, you hear actors talking a lot about, even if they're playing really irredeemable characters, they have to find something to love. Well, that's what that process is. You find something, you take yourself to it and you find something. You know, and I think any notion of purity or any notion of kind of honesty in the work is really all about that. And I don't think it's an intellectual exercise. It's not. I think it's a purely physical, emotional response. I don't think it's something you have to go away and think about and write an essay about. You know, it either hits you or it doesn't. You know, when we use lots of jargon as actors, don't we? We use a lot of jargon about, you know, being present and sort of being in the moment, and, you know, does something speak to me? You know, does this part speak to you? And you think, no, it doesn't. It's a piece of paper. No, it doesn't speak to me. But whatever it is whatever that connection is, that's physical. It's you kind of go, oh yeah. I mean, I had a friend who used to talk about being able to taste the part. Like he'd read it and he'd go, this is real, because I could taste it. And I knew exactly what he meant. You know, it kind of became a bit of a joke, you know, but he could feel it. He could feel the language physically in his mouth. That's why I fell in love with Mamet when I was a young actor. You know, just because the muscularity of the language. But all of those things, all of that process, it's all about finding that pure thing.
Now,
Sorry, I'm babbling.
No.
You got me on my soapbox now.
It's great. To get back to my earlier point is we really don't know each other well. Through your work, seeing you in your work, doing your work, there is no question to me as a person and as an actor that you really love what you do. There's just, to me, it's just not even a question in my mind. I'm being up here on on this stage. A memory is coming back. Years and years ago, David Margulies and Lois Smith were up here, and I asked them, and they were in their 70s at that point, so they're in their 80s now, and I asked both of them. I said, "You've been doing this for a really long time, a really long time," and they went, "Yes." And I said, how do you stay in love? How do you stay in love with it? And the both of them looked at me like I was an alien. They had no idea what I was asking them, because it was just obvious that they so love what they do. And so I would like to ask you, what are some of the things you do if you feel as if you're falling out of love with what you do? And what keeps it going for you? Well,
I must say, I think Lois and David are absolutely right. It's very hard to answer, because the vicissitudes of the industry are such that you're constantly having to deal with other people disagreeing with your take on things, and the sense of losing jobs, getting rejected, all of the negative stuff, all the stuff that we have to endure as performers, all the stuff that we kind of go through to get to that little moment. You kind of take it on board as a kind of part of the process. You don't expect anything else. And I think loving something. I've got a friend who is no longer an actor. He was an actor for about 30 years. He's now a teacher, a very good one. And he runs a theatre program in a college in New Zealand now. And he finally stopped looking for acting work when his wife had a very serious talk with him once. And she said, this brilliant analogy. She said, acting, it's like you're married to me, but you've got this mistress who treats you incredibly badly. But you keep going back to her. And every time you go back, she uses you, she slaps you in the face, she shows you her tits, and then she tells you to fuck off. And I thought, that is brilliant. She doesn't sleep with you, she just shows you her tits. That's all she does. You don't even get a fuck out of it. And then she sends you on your way. And he kind of went, yeah. But the thing is, but he never fell out of love with it. He never fell out of love with performing, because he's passing that on now to his students, and they're, So I don't think you may, sort of. I don't think you ever do. You don't. It's like a. This is my theory. Now I could be wrong, but I've never thought that. I mean, are we all actors in the room? Mainly actors, performers. I've never thought that acting is the result of having something extra to offer. It's not like we've been imbued with some special thing that the guy next to you doesn't have. My feeling is that acting is some kind of genetic flaw. like we're missing a gene. We're missing And we spend our lives looking for that thing that's going to fill the gap. So we're constantly kind of reaching out, like, is this going to be it? Is this job going to be? Have you noticed? I don't know if you do it. I do it. I still do it. And I'm lucky. I don't have to audition that much anymore. But I still kind of have this thing. May I stand up for a minute?
Oh, please do.
You walk into a room. When you're outside, kind of going, yeah, I've got this. I've got this. Yeah, this is right up my street. This part. The character's 62, my age. He's got a Spanish dad and an Italian mother, like I have. He's from London. Perfect. You walk into the audition or the interview, and suddenly you're like this. And your whole body is saying, love me, please love me. And we do it every time. We do it every time. Or we do the other thing. We've been kicked, the mistress has kicked us in the balls often enough that we walk in kind of going, fuck you. One or the other. And so whoever's auditioning your interview is either kind of going, call security. or they kind of go, yeah, I like this guy. So it's like, it's this never-ending thing, and I think it's like we've got this little bit, this little gene we're missing. I really believe that.
I'm getting that. I understand that. So we were talking upstairs about the importance of stories, actors' stories, and what that's like for actors. And I didn't get to share with you that one of the things that it reminds me of is when I don't live in New York anymore, but when I used to live on the Upper West Side, and all of a sudden there's six of us on a corner, and all of a sudden we go to a pub and we start telling the stories. It reminds me of what Hemingway says about matadors. Whenever you need to find a matador after the event, they'll all be in a tavern in the back room drinking and complaining about how their managers had cheated them. That's what that reminds me of. And then it reminded me of a story that Uta told me, a theater story. Now I don't know if it's true or not.
Doesn't matter.
But she said that Michael Redgrave had a reputation, and he had a proclivity for being tied up during the sexual act. And John Gielgud knew this. And so whenever John Gielgud saw Michael Redgrave, he'd say, "Michael Redgrave, I'll be bound." That was an Uta story.
I can believe it. But British actors, they love getting tied up. No, but the point, no, it's true. I do an exercise with my students. I'll show you the exercise. They've done their speech, they've done the thing that they're working on, and it's all like arms everywhere. And I say, okay, and I get them to sit on a chair and sit on their hands and wrap their feet around the chair so that they can't wait. Francesca's sitting here, she's done this exercise. I've done this exercise with you many times. And she's got the scars to prove it. And I say, all right, now do the speech. And do it with all the intention you had the first time, all the meaning, all the value, all the emotional content, but like this. And it's amazing what happens. First of all, it gets 10 times better because the energy is not going out here. There's none of this, there's none of that. And all the energy is coming and out. And it's just fantastic. And, and I once did that with an actor. And he said, as I was doing it, he said, oh no, that's right, I tied his hands behind his back. That's right, I tied his hands behind his back. And he said, you're not the first British actor to do this to me. I didn't pursue that. But this thing about stories, it's actually, I think, I was trying to make a point about it upstairs, not to be, facetious or deliberately just, flippant. I think the way we tell stories, the way we, share tales from the trenches, if you like, it's not just about, amusing one's colleagues in the green room. I mean, that's a byproduct of it. But I think it's a way that we bind this tribe together. I think it's a way that we recognize and acknowledge each other's trials and tribulations. I think it's the way that we identify ourselves as this tribe, and it links us. You know, when a young actor, or when an older actor often tells us a younger actor a story about something that happened outside of his or her experience, like, you know, a tale about, you know, some naughty thing that an actor did or some amazing event in the theatre. Usually it's always about when things go wrong, because they're the best stories. What's happening is that that young actor is forging a link with the tradition that he or she belongs to. And that's a terribly important process, I think. It's a way of acknowledging and recognizing each other. Because, you know, we come together in these groups in a very short period of time, and we have to assume an extraordinary level of intimacy. You know, you meet the actress who's going to play your wife, that you've had a marriage for 30 years and you're about to leave her. You meet her that morning, and then the next thing you're rehearsing a scene. You have to create an instant rapport, an instant friendship, a relationship. And you do that with everyone else, and then it's over as soon as, almost as quickly as it's formed. But those moments, those stories, and I think there's a reason why they're always about disasters. Because you never hear actors telling stories about, did I tell you about the time when I got these great reviews in such and such a You just kind of go, what a jerk. I mean, it doesn't happen, because that's not interesting. What's interesting is, did I tell you about the time I played this part, and oh God, it was awful. It was awful. You know, the thing that happened, and so died on stage, and then I lost my, you know, and you're like this. Because the disaster, however anaesthetized it has become in the telling, however kind of, you know, neutral and sort of unthreatening it's become in the telling, what it does is it links us with the frailty that we all share. You know, it links us with our frailty is linked to your frailty and your frailty, and so that we share that frailty. We understand it, which is why we laugh. It's why we enjoy those stories. Why we, you know, why they become celebrated, and also, you know, the wit and the way it kind of elevates someone's reputation or destroys someone's reputation. You know, the stories aren't always kind. I mean, they can be quite cruel sometimes in telling. But the thing is that they are part of a process that is terribly important. I remember working with a director. It was like our third day of rehearsal, and there were a couple of, you know, heavy hitters. I was a very young actor, and there were a couple of heavy hitters in the green room. You know, actors who I was looking up to. So when I was my first stint at the Royal Shakespeare Company, I was 25. And one of these actors is telling this delicious story about this disaster that occurred to him and his colleagues when they were doing the play that we were rehearsing. And the director came in and kind of went, "Oh, come on, enough of this green room shit." And this actor suddenly turned around and pointed at this director and said, "What you think is green room shit is green room manure." No, were you? Yeah. Oh, I loved him. And that was the same actor. I'll tell you, he's passed away now. Sebastian Shaw, his name was. Sebastian Shaw, wonderful actor. I was 24, and I went up to him one day in rehearsal, and I said, "Mr. Shaw," we still called older actors Mr. in those days. I said, "Mr. Shaw, what can you, do you have any advice?" One of those questions. "Do you have any advice?" Yeah. And he was. I remember he was eating. He was in a break. I mean, poor bastard. He must have thought, "Oh, not another one. Fuck off." He was eating his sandwich, and I said, "Mr. Shaw, do you have any advice?" And he just said, "Yes, I do." And he was picking stuff out of his teeth. He said, "Never stand when you can sit. And never sit when you can lie down, all right? And at the time I walked away kind of going, oh, you stupid old fool. You know, I was like really disappointed. But now, that is ringing in my ears. It's like, you know, you've been standing there for an hour and a half trying to get this shot, and I'm thinking, oh, Sebastian. But they're important. That process, you know, never dismiss it or diminish that moment when an actor's, you know, I think it's very important.
This was so many years ago. I was in my early 20s, and for some reason, Lincoln Center was thinking of casting me as Antonio in Measure for Measure, right? Which is a big deal, big deal. And so I was walking. I was walking past Lincoln Center. There was my friend Risa Brayman, who was a casting director at the time in New York, and Alan Rickman. And so Risa said, "So what are you up to?" And I said, "Well, you know, I think they're thinking about giving me the part of Antonio." And Alan Rickman says, "Lots of time in the green room." And I went, "Oh, yeah." And there's just a way of thinking about these things.
Yeah. Do you think for a moment, because I don't believe it is, do you think for a moment that it's an accident that Shakespeare, when he wrote King Lear, he gave Lear a 45-minute break? That's no accident. He had some old actor kind of going, "Will, for crying out loud. Don't give me you've got to give me some time out." I mean, there's a 45-minute break. You know, Lear gets to go and lie down. We are now imbued with the spirit of Sebastian Shaw. You will never forget his name now. That's not an accident.
Now, I don't know, forgive my ignorance, have you played Malvolio?
No.
I've been thinking about you as Malvolio all day
That's
long.
very interesting, because I've been thinking about me as Malvolio for many years.
For real?
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it.
I think you're a
It's a lovely
perfect,
part.
perfect Malvolio.
He gets lots of green room time. You could play Malvolio, do your taxes between and curtain call. Yeah, great. You know, there's a wonderful old actor, another old actor. I love these old guys. They're like these repositories of such wisdom. This old actor he was just Leslie Pitt, his name was. He was, you know, a jobbing actor. He wasn't famous in any particular way. He wasn't, you know, but you know, he kind of ticked over the years. And he was always playing old men when he was in his 30s. And he was a bit like Wilfrid Hyde White, that kind of actor, sort of rather sort of, you know, a little bit sort of diffident and sort of, hello, played Vickers and things like that. And in the last 10, 15 years of his life, he got a gig on this TV show in England where he played a judge. And he would turn up, you know, every 2 or 3 episodes as this judge, and he loved this gig. He loved it. And he said, I said to him, I was doing a play, I was doing Murder in the Cathedral with him at the time. And I said, so what's the, I'd never been anywhere near a TV show at that point. I said, what's it like? Oh, it's marvellous, absolutely marvellous. I sit there, I've got all my lines in front of me. I don't have to read anything. I can read it, and every now and again I've just got to go, order! So it's marvellous. And I said, don't you get bored? And he went, no, I do all my postcards. I thought that was brilliant. He's up there, he's on the set, everyone's acting up a storm, you know, all the youngsters are pointing and shouting. And every now and again, order! Dear nephew. I love that. Please God. Consummation devoutly to be wished.
You've taken me into a direction. Uda talked about once when she was speaking with Henry Fonda, who, you know...
See, the names you're dropping are so impressive. I'm dropping names people nobody has ever heard. Leslie who?
Leslie
Sebastian who?
I will never forget Leslie Pitt. Never. But she said she had this conversation with Henry Fonda, and she loved him. She loved him as an actor, loved everything he did. And she mentioned that when he spoke to her, he was very sorry about not having played the big roles. That he made a decision at one point, he went Hollywood, which doesn't seem so bad anymore. There was a point where that was a bad thing to do. But he went Hollywood and it became a huge success. But he always felt, to talk about this thing, this missing thing, he always felt that he did not fulfill himself because he did not play these roles.
Well, I think there might be a reason for that, and I think it's that you hear that a lot from actors who have made, their names and their fortunes in movies and TV, and who started out in the theatre and then haven't been back for decades. You hear them talking a lot about that, and I don't think it's because I think it's because of bad choices they've made. I don't think they've sat there making movies after movies and then regretting it. I think it's to do with the fact that theatre is still the only place where actors actually own it. We own, when we're on stage, we own it. The writer's not there, the director's gone on to another thing, and every night, 8 times a week, it's up to us to make it work. It's up to us. We can't stop. We can't get another take. We can't. We're not in thrall of some showrunner. TV belongs to writers. Movies belong to directors. Theatre belongs to us. And I think that desire, that link, which kind of in a way goes back to the purity thing we were talking about. Mm-hmm. That's where it's pure. Mm. And I think there's there's a good reason for that. It's interesting now that it's becoming, in the last few years or so, and it's been happening in the UK as well as on Broadway, this trend towards big name film stars to come and do theatre. Very often it's their first time, and it might be commercialism, it might be a way to kind of prop up maybe a career that's sagging a bit. It might be a way to just kind of get your brand out there again. All of those things may well be true, but I think as well, there's something about this. There's something about Peter Brook's famous thing about an empty space is an empty space. But as soon as when a person walks across that empty space, it becomes an act of theatre. That's a very simple thought, but a very complex one as well. But we are the ones that make that live. Mm-hmm. You can have all the lighting and all the scenery and all the back project. You can have all of that, but unless there's a human, unless we're walking through there, talking to each other, having a relationship, having something happening between, it doesn't. In a sense, it doesn't exist. And I think that's maybe a part of that regret.
You're bringing back a memory. I was lucky enough.
It's like therapy, this, isn't it? I've just saved $250.
I was lucky enough to see Dame Judith Anderson in Medea. She played the nurse in Medea, Zoe Caldwell, Medea, right? So, and it's funny because it was coming to me before you mentioned the walking onto the stage in space. So it's right before, I think it's the end of the first act, when there's a sense that something really bad is going to happen. It hasn't been mentioned. We don't know. People who don't know Medea, she kills all her children at the end of the play.
Spoiler alert.
And Dame Judith Anderson is the nurse who loves these children. So literally, all she did after her exchange with Medea, all she did was walk from this part of the stage, stopped, center, looked out, and then kept walking. When she stopped and she looked out, chills, I feel them now, came up through the back of my head, and she did not move a muscle. Did not move a muscle. How did she do that?
Well, I don't know.
But
She's brilliant.
Right?
But there's,
Right?
you know, this is anyone who's taken any of my classes. You know, you've heard me. You know, Frank, you've heard me bang on about this on from now. Stillness. It's the greatest thing on stage. It's the most powerful thing on stage. Movies and TV are kinetic by nature. Things have to keep moving to keep your interest. You can't have a still moment. When you think about it, when was the last time you saw a still moment in a movie? Even in a Bergman movie. There's like, people are moving. You know. But on stage, you know, can I just say, I show you, this is something, this is really important. You know, I do this thing where you talk about, let's assume that is a neutral position. That's neutral. Yeah, let's just, for argument's sake. The minute someone does that, or anything, or just goes to their comfort place, they're in character, aren't they? They're no longer neutral, they're now playing someone who does that, or whatever it is. And when you're on stage, that stillness, that moment when you're just absolutely still, as long as the thought is alive, as long as the intention is alive, you can't stand on stage and be thinking about, you know, or maybe you can. Maybe you can. Maybe that's real genius right there. Maybe you can be standing there thinking about where you're going to go for a drink after the show. Maybe you can. But I never do. No. But seriously, stillness becomes, you can't take your eyes off it. You cannot take your eyes off it because it's energy. It's just energy. And I'm sure that's you know, and actors, you know, certainly actors like, you know, Ms. Wanamaker are you know, are geniuses at understanding that. You know,
and at this point, she was in her 70s, and she did a lot of theater. Mm-hmm. And what I'm getting back to your point is that without having that period of time, there was a moment, and we may be, sorry to say this, we may be one of the last of an era where there was a given that you had an apprenticeship to go through.
Yeah.
I did regional theater. You know, you start to get your job. You do regional theater. You play Steinbeck, Williams, Miller. It just keeps going on and on.
Yeah,
and on. You spend years doing.
It's a very similar
Shakespeare, and then you come back after that and you go again. And if you're lucky, you get work. And some said for a male. Around the age of 35, you're about ready. You're about ready to play the big roles after 15 to 20 years of work. So what I'm getting at is that for her to be able to do that and communicate that without moving a muscle took 50 some years of doing. And that's kind of what we're missing now, because we're being asked for the instant instead of the home-cooked meal, right? The good old-fashioned home-cooked meal. Wow. Hi. See, I am so nervous because you gave me a challenge, and I don't know if I'm up to it or not.
What was the challenge?
To do a Tommy Cooper. You gave me that challenge. So I'm going to try it. Okay, ready? They don't know Tommy Cooper. All right. One thing I'm really good at is I know a good audience from a bad audience. Good night. Phew! Thank you for laughing. Phew! All right, I feel better now.
Oh, good. I'm glad you got that off your chest.
All right, so I'm to ask you about John Hancock.
Oh yeah. We were talking about stories upstairs, and we were talking about the thing about getting older in this business. So this is my experience anyway. I've been acting for. I graduated from drama school in '74. So what's that? 40 years. As you get older, you know, someone said to me once, the three things that you need for longevity in a creative industry, in any kind of creative work, is taste, perseverance, and patience. Now, you can, one could flatter oneself and say, yeah, I've got reasonable taste. I've done some decent things. Perseverance, yes, I've been at it for a long time, and I'm still at it. I'm still keen to be at it. Patience. As I'm getting older, I'm losing my patience. I'm losing my ability to indulge other people's stupidity. Not that I'm becoming an arsehole in any way. I don't want you to think I'm suddenly become a horrible person. But I don't just sit there and acquiesce when I hear like something really stupid being told to me. And I may have told you this story when we were working together. I worked with a director, and I was up for a part. It was in the early days of HBO, and HBO were doing these original movies, and there was a movie called Stealing Heaven, which was a true story about an Iraqi fighter pilot who flew his MiG jet into Israeli airspace, took the risk of being shot down, and once he got into Israeli airspace, he asked for political asylum. But the kicker was that he'd smuggled his wife and baby daughter in the jet. Great story. I'm up to play the Iraqi pilot, and I meet the director, and we read the thing. Fine, he wants to meet me again next week. We read it. We read it 5 times. He phones up again and says he wants to read it once more, and I said to my agent, no, he must know by now whether he wants me or not. I'll meet him again. We'll chat about it creatively, but I'm not reading again. So he agreed to that. So we meet again in this hotel. It must have cost the company a fortune. He was in this hotel in London for weeks. We meet again and we're chatting very amiably. And then he sidles up to me and pulls out the script and says, Alfred, let's read that scene again. And I said, no, John, no, I'm not going to read it again. I thought I made that perfectly clear. I'm more than happy to talk to you about the project, but I don't feel I need to read the part again. And he then sidled a bit closer, put his arm around me, and in a very, I have to say, condescending and deeply patronizing way, said to me, I directed a movie with Robert De Niro, and Bobby, for that part, read for me 9 times. And he nodded, as if somehow this was proof that he was serious. And that if I refused to read, I was some kind of amateur. So I said, John, I can take that in 2 ways. You're either thinking of me in the same breath as Robert De Niro, in which case I am deeply, deeply flattered. Or it means that you don't know a good actor when you see one. And it was the first time in my life I started to sweat. I knew I'd lost the job. I started to sweat. I remember I had this brand new shirt on. I bought this new shirt, and I could feel this single bead of sweat running. It was like a loose shirt running down my arm. And I remember thinking, I've got to catch it before it hits the ground. So this bead of sweat, catch it, and I thought, I can't deal with this. This is like idiocy. This is, and I realized at that moment, I was like, I'm losing my patience. I'm losing, and I think there's a point when, as actors, we have to kind of stand up for ourselves. We have to kind of make it clear that we're not performing seals. We're part of the process. We're not an accidental result of it.
Right. I'm not being rude. I don't wear a watch, and I'm just checking the time. Okay, we're good.
I thought maybe you might have had a bigger name on the other line.
So
I'm only here because Tom Wilkinson said no.
So may I tell you my Robert De Niro story? Okay, so I'm a very young actor, and I'm up for the very first television series ever to be shot by Showtime, the network. Okay? And I get called to California. I am so broke. And I'm looking at this script and I'm like, this is not gonna fly. This thing is not gonna fly. And I should not be doing this. I really shouldn't be doing this. I don't see this working. And I was with William Morris at the time, and my agents are saying, look, this is your big chance. You know, this is Showtime. It's the first time they've ever done a TV series. You really have to consider this. So I go in, and Rita Wilson, who is Mrs. Tom Hanks, was up for the other role. It was a romantic comedy type thing called Poison. And so she was up for the part, and somebody else was up for the part. And so we go to network, and I'm going, oh, Rita Wilson, that could be interesting. And this other person, and I went, oh, that could be bad. That could be bad. So I go back to my hotel room, the Sheraton, and I'm sitting there, and I literally am on the edge of my bed saying, what would Robert De Niro do? And I'm just like, well, he wouldn't do this. He wouldn't do this. Oh God, oh God, oh God. And Ring, it's my buddy, who's taking me to lunch before I have to go to the final thing for network to like calm my nerves. So I'm going through the lobby with that thought in my mind. I'm going through the lobby, and I see the revolving doors, and I see my friend Brian, who's like the most gregarious Irishman you ever met in your life. So Brian's going through the revolving doors. He sees me, goes like this, and somebody slams into my body. And I'm like, holy shit. And the guy that was with him looks at me like that. And I look. It was Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro slammed right into me. And I'm standing there kind of getting myself together. Oh my God, it was Robert De Niro. And he was incognito. He was in this little Italian hat, and he was hiding. And I'm like this, and my friend Brian goes, how do you know Robert De Niro? Because he saw the whole thing. It was like he saw De Niro go, hey, like, you know. And then I go, oh my God, Robert De Niro ran into me. That's my answer. I'm not supposed to do this. And so they offer it to me, and I take it. And it was so bad. It was so bad. It was. You get omens from heaven and you don't listen. And what happens? Anyway, that's my De Niro story. Should I ask you things like your favorites, or would you?
No, we're having way too much fun. Why don't we just?
Yeah.
If anybody's got a question, let's just open out.
Yeah, great idea.
This is where everyone comes and goes. Let's call the cab. Keep the car running. So.
Hi, my name is Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Great to be here. Awesome story. I have a question for you. You talked a little bit about the actors' process and their role in the whole thing. How do you feel about actors now generating their own work? And is that something that you do for parts that you feel that you are right for, to avoid, it being in those situations with directors and producers who are like, oh, passing on you, but you want to create your own stuff?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great when actors, if they can, actors are storytellers. We can create our own stuff. We can create stories, and any actor that has that drive to do that, I think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, the difficulty, of course, is getting it to go somewhere else to kind of but I think just as a part of the creative process, if you like, it's a rather overused phrase, but you know what I mean. I think it's terribly important. I mean, even if it's just to keep yourself alive and keeping yourself energized and engaged when you're doing something else. I mean, it could be something as seemingly sort of every day as keeping a journal. It's not every day. It could seem that way, but that's a process. That's a creative endeavor. It could be writing a play. It could be maybe trying to write a script. Maybe trying to get a movie off the ground. I think anything that gets your creative juices going, anything that gets you kind of involved emotionally and intellectually, I think is always a good thing. Always, always, always. I think the worst thing that we can do as actors is to stay, in a sense, I mean, we're talking about stillness, but I mean, it's to stay still, to just be somehow at the beck and call of other people's choices. I think can be very disheartening and very demoralising. So I think if you've got the energy and the desire. Because all of us, everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody's got, regardless of how trivial you might think your life is, regardless of how ordinary you might think you are, and God knows I always thought that about myself for many, many years. You just scratch anybody in this room, I guarantee it. You spend 10 minutes talking to a complete stranger about something honest about yourself, and you will discover amazing things, secrets, unfulfilled desires, unspoken dreams, whatever it is, you'll find it there. And that's what writers do. I've known enough writers who will be like this, just staring out of a window, and you kind of go, "You want a cup of tea?" "Shh, I'm working." And the first time that happened to me, I kind of went, "What do you mean?" Oh. I realised they were working. A friend of mine came to stay with me for a month while his wife was deciding whether she wanted to stay married to him or not. So he lived with me for a month, and that's what he's all right. And that's what he did. I'd make him a cup of coffee in the morning. He'd just stare out the window. But at the end of the month, he had he was working. So I think anything like that, we've all got that. Because we're all in the same world. We're all having, we're all experiencing things in the same, we're soaking stuff up. We've all got amazing stories inside of us, and if you can channel it some way, I mean, the advantage a professional writer has over a professional actor is that the writer has found a language, the writer has found a means of telling a story. Some famous writers say that we're all basically telling the same 7 stories over and over again. But there are only 7 stories in the world. I actually think there's only one story in the world, and that's about how you live your life, how you see the world, how the world sees you, and I think that's everybody's experience, and we've all got that. So yeah, all power to you. I think it's a fantastic thing. And when people kind of say things like, "Yeah, but so and so's an actor," oh, it drives me mad. That really angers me. It's like telling a child, "Yeah, but you're just a girl." It's the same kind of, horrible. We've all, yeah. And if you're, Paul, if you're working on something, if you've got something that or something you want to work on, I'd say do it. Absolutely. Because even if it doesn't go anywhere, even if it's just you in your apartment writing stuff out or dreaming, it'll have a positive impact on your work in any other endeavour, because it becomes part of you.
Now, you're a great practitioner of this. You work on many levels. You've been
many.
You do.
I sound like a Mel Brooks character.
You've been a part of theater in Los Angeles.
Yep.
You're an advocate of the 99-seat theater.
Yep.
Yeah, and I get that and I understand it.
Yep.
Because we all need a place. We need a place to practice our craft. Where there's not this overhead, where there's not this the insanity of what the producers go through, But how do I put this? Because someone who's the practitioner of that, working on whatever level, a theater like this, and then being on a major set like playing a Persian.
Well, I can't. I mean, I think I like to keep busy, and I like I had one of the most influential people in my life was my English master, a man called Martin Corber, who's now sadly passed away. But after I left school, we stayed very close friends, and he came to see stuff I did. He passed away 6 months after he saw me do Red on Broadway, it was like 2010, and he got me through my first auditions to get into the National Youth Theatre. He coached me when I had to apply for my student grant, because in England in those days you had to audition for your grant. I mean, the government paid for my education, but I had to audition for it. And he got me through all that. He was like a great influence in my life. And when he came, when he came to see Red, he came the same night as a good friend of mine. And so the three of us went out to dinner after the show. And the show was a big hit and everything, and it was all it was all going swimmingly. And the great thing about being in a hit on Broadway, of course, is you can get a table anywhere. A friend of mine once said, when you're in a hit on Broadway, New York opens up like the most beautiful vagina. And when you're in a flop, it closes up like a duck's ass. and it's absolutely true. Anyway, so we're somewhere having a wonderful dinner, and my friend turns around to Martin and says, "So, Martin, you've known Fred since he was like, he knew me since I was 11 years old, doing my first school plays." And he said, "Was he a good actor?" And Martin said, "No, he was a terrible actor, absolutely awful, but he was a marvelous show-off." And I think the reason why I keep doing stuff is because I think there's a part of me that's still a terrible show-off. I think there's a part of me that's still kind of going, "Love me." It's either part of you or it isn't. I think all actors, we're all show-offs at some level or other. We all kind of, we've all got our little bag of props. I mean, it might be a metaphor. I'm speaking metaphorically, obviously. We've got our little bag of props, and we turn up, and we hope that someone says, "Go on, do your thing." Do that thing you do. Come on. And we want to be coaxed, and we want to say, "No, it's okay. Come on. Oh, all right." It's that thing. It's that bit of us that's still a child that still wants to be approved of. It's interesting how actors have phrases when actors are working. They say things like, "The audience loved it. The audience loved me. I really gave them. I gave something tonight. We discovered something." It's all positive, loving, sharing terminology. Stand-up comics, what do they say? "Fucking killed it tonight. I killed them. I knocked them dead. I slayed them." It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a totally different relationship. Actors. It's all this. Comics. It's all kind of "fuck you." They want to just stick it. I love that.
You were talking earlier about not closing yourself off by saying, my character wouldn't do that, and how that kind of closes yourself off to finding yourself in the character. When you're trying to do that, are there times where you even get stuck trying to find where you are in that character?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have specific things that you do?
Well, yeah, there's all kinds of things you can do. I think, what's interesting is that when that does happen, in my view anyway, when that happens, that's when some interesting discovery is going to be made. We used to do an exercise at college where, when we were working on script analysis or text work, and we were kind of preparing to start rehearsals, we had this exercise where, and it's an old Stanislavskian thing, I'm sure you probably know about it. You would take everything your character says about him or herself, and you would write it all down. And then you would write down another list, all the things that other characters say about your character. And the more contradictory those lists are, the more interesting that role is. Because like we are in real life, we contradict ourselves. Somebody might say, "Oh, Fred, he's great, so sweet. Well, he'll give you the shirt off his back." And someone else will say, "You know what, that guy wouldn't give me the time of day." It all depends. It all depends on how people view you, how you're behaving. We all contradict ourselves constantly, and characters do that. I mean, Stanislavski discovered that when he was, he was working pretty much in tandem with Sigmund Freud. Freud was looking for underlying reasons of behaviour in his patients. And Stanislavski was looking for underlying reasons of behaviour in the characters he was working on with Chekhov, and so there was this kind of, when you look at those lists and you see that contradiction, that's why when you say, "I don't think my character would say that," you're denying yourself a tremendous opportunity for some insight, and because when you discover how your character says it, if that contradicts another moment in the play, that's life. That's what we all do. You see what I'm saying? And also, whenever I hear an actor say, I don't think my character will say, well, you thought you'd say it when you took the job. How come you're saving that remark for after you've signed the contract? That seems a bit odd to me. Seems a bit opportune. You know, I mean, you read it when you kind of went, yeah, I'll do it. You know. But that's just me. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so helpful. Thank you.
Actually, two things. Radio says hello.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
What's the process like for getting into your class for auditioning? Do I have to crawl on my belly like a reptile or what?
No, but you know what? That's a really good idea. I've never thought of that. No, I don't teach regularly. My teaching is usually when I've got like when I taught here a few years ago. I was doing a play in New York, and I was coming here on my day off and doing my class here. I did like a semester, about 12, 13 weeks. And that's really how I work, because I don't charge for my classes, because I don't want to. I want to be able to say what I feel is important, and rather than, so I don't want, you know, there's always that dynamic of, you know, I paid $100 for this, you know, and say, well, you know, you didn't. So it's kind of, you know, the relationship's a bit more honest in my view. But you know, but yes, it's usually I inherit groups of students. You know, I started off teaching by basically just filling in for a colleague of mine from drama school who was teaching a class, and he just phoned me and said, you know, I've got to go for this audition. Can you take my class for 2 hours on a Friday? And I did, and I was fortunate. It was amazing. I went back to my old school, and who was in my class? Joseph Fiennes was in my class. Douglas Hodge was in my class, and a couple of other people, and it was really interesting because I haven't kept in touch with them that much since then, but what was really interesting was that they, and this was only maybe 5 or 6 years, no, a bit more than that, 10 years maybe after I'd graduated, and it was this kind of just seeing young actors and how they were, their aspirations and their fears. That's the other thing that's really amazing about student actors, that they all have the same fear, and a lot of teaching is about allowing them to just own that fear, not deny it, not pretend it's not there, just own it, because we all have it. You know, you have it. You know, that's why actors like Henry Fonda or any famous actor who regrets not doing more theatre, that's a fear. That's a fear manifested, a fear of perhaps not being taken as seriously as he could have done, not having fulfilled something, you know. And so it's so if I teach here, just turn up. Just turn up.
Hi, I just want to ask you a question. In addition to some of the advice that you've gotten from some of the older actors, is there something that you've come across that you learned yourself that you wish you had known years before?
Yeah, don't stand when you can see. No, that as well. But yeah, no, it's actually an interesting question actually, because I've thought about that a lot. I think I wish, and this is a very practical thing. It's not anything kind of, you know, sort of mystical or mysterious. I wish when I'd been a young actor, I knew how to operate in the world in terms of how to just get by. How to pay my tax, how to look for jobs, how not to freak out when you go for an audition and you don't get it, or just how to operate in the world, just how to have a sense of myself. I never had a real sense of myself until I started working regularly, you know, and then of course it was through other people's validation, you know, and even that is a little bit like trying to stand up in a rickety boat in a storm. You know, it's difficult, and I wish I'd known more about that. I wish I'd been a bit bright, a bit smarter about, you know, and a bit more economical with my anxiety. You know, I wish I'd learned how to not sweat the small stuff sooner. You know, it took me till I was into my 50s before I was able to kind of go, you know what, that can wait. That can wait. You know, and that I think is just experience. I mean, my experience as a young actor was very, very limited. My worldview was limited, and my horizons were not very wide. through various, family and domestic circumstances. So I think, one thing I always encourage young actors to do is, if you're not working and you can afford it, travel. And if you can't afford to travel, go for a walk, go hiking. Do something that doesn't cost a lot of money, that takes you out of your immediate environment, takes you somewhere else, with other people. Don't constantly seek validation among your colleagues, because they're all going through the same shit you are. Discover other people.
You're bringing up two things at the same time for me now. One of them.
Can you handle it?
One of them. I don't know if I can or not. No. One of them is anonymity, and this is a very odd thing to say. I love my anonymity. I love being a nobody. I really do. And I also love to work. So this is a tough thing. But even coming here today, there were two little vignettes that I noticed. Right. This coming from New Jersey. There's a very well-dressed woman with her two children, and she was impeccable until she opened her mouth. And it was, Anzao! Anzao! I will never forget that. And then the woman waiting for the bus, a young, attractive woman waiting for the bus, the way that she redid her hair 3-4 times made me start to understand where she was headed.
Yeah.
Now,
That's you're being observant. That's wonderful.
And when all of a sudden it's about, that goes away, and that scares me, because everything you're talking about, that's the work, and being able to go for a walk is great advice, because you're out of your world and you're into the real world and you're being challenged like crazy, instead of the idea of, which is death, as we all know. And then, so anonymity and fame, there's a question there.
Is there?
Yeah. There could be.
They're
Maybe
both,
there isn't.
they're both stalking horses. They're both dangerous and they're both delicious at the same time. I think anonymity can be frustrating. It can be a salvation. Fame can be very delicious. It can be very gratifying. It can also be a headache. I think there's grades of it. There's variations of it. There are things that you can. I always say I always think my level of celebrity means that I can always get a nice table in a restaurant. But I can also do my own laundry. I can go and deliver my dry cleaning and not get it's a movable feast. I mean, it's like it's it's like who was it I was talking? Oh, some very wonderful actor, very famous actor in England, Jeremy Irons. Jeremy Irons told this story when I was working with him, that he was with his kids, and they were young, and he was going through passport control. He was very famous at the time, and his kids were behind him, and they can't hear what's going on. But Jeremy is talking to the immigration guy, and the immigration guy's looking at his thing, and suddenly he goes, "Yeah, that's great. welcome. Have a good day." Take a look like this, and Jeremy turns around to his kids and goes, "You laughed at my joke." And his kids went, "Oh, Dad, everybody laughs at your jokes." I love that.
Wow.
Yeah, they kind of saw right through it.
Wow. and then this next one is a question of a sense of self, which is an interesting one. And what it's I'm in my late 20s. I have not been to England.
You look terrible.
Tommy Cooper. So and I'm in my late 20s, and I'm playing. That's what my wife does. So I'm playing Algernon, right, in The Importance of Being Earnest, and I've learned my received pronunciation, and then did you hear what I was playing, Lane? I've got it all down, and they curled my hair, and I'm wearing a smoking jacket, and the first preview, we start. And there I am, doing this dialect, and my hair is curled, and I'm doing The Importance of Being Earnest, and my voice inside of me is saying, "Who the fuck do you think you are?"
That happens to me every time.
But this thing about expanding yourself in that way, I know you go through it. Oh my God!
We all do.
mentioned
We all-
ethnicity,
we all do. We
and
all
he's
do.
done that, and
But we all do
a
that.
class. Ethnicity and class, you've done it all.
Yeah, but that anxiety, we all do, don't we? I mean, I think every time I finish a job, I think, that's it, they found me out now. I have this. I've turned it into a kind of joke now, but it's true. There's always a moment. There's always a moment in rehearsal where I'm absolutely, and this isn't me being in any way, falsely modest. I know I can act. But there's a moment when I'm absolutely convinced that I'm never going to play this. That I'm going to. I've just bitten off too much. More than I can chew. There's no way that this part is anywhere near inside my wheelhouse. There's no way I'm going to get away with this. There's just no, and it becomes a very real thing. And it lasts for a few days, and and I start fucking everything up at work, and everyone's kind of going. He seemed so confident yesterday. And it's just a manifestation of an anxiety. And the thing is, you kind of think you're going to get the little tap on. Are you holding each other's hands because you're recognising something? I'm right, aren't I? Am I right? Am I right? As my Jewish auntie used to say, am I right? Am I right, Alfie? And you think any minute now there's going to be this voice, this person in a sort of raincoat and a briefcase is going to come up to you and say, "I'm terribly sorry. We meant the other Alfred Molina. There's been this awful mistake. I'm so sorry. I know you spent 40 years at it, but really, it's the other chap." But it's just it's just that thing. And I remember there's it happens to everybody. And it's so reassuring when you look up to people. I'm still a bit starstruck. There are actors and actresses I look up to, and I kind of go, "Oh God, that's an actor. Well, what the fuck am I doing?" I don't. You look at these people, and you kind of go, "These people are they're gods to me. They're like, seriously, they can do stuff that I can't. There's no way. I can't. That wouldn't even have occurred to me in a million years." And the choices they make. I'm sure if I'd seen Zoe Wanamaker in that moment of stillness, the same thing, I would have just. And I always think, well, what's the point? What's the point? I'm useless. And then you meet these people, and you kind of express your love and your adoration and your respect for what they do, and they'll suddenly turn around and kind of go, "Oh my God, I should have been here last time. It was terrible last time. I nearly shat myself. It was awful." We've all got feet of clay, and there's something. But we have to own it. We have to own that. You can't be put off by that. You can't be beaten down by that, because what that is a very human thing. It's not you being a failure. It's not being bad at what you do. It's you just being wonderfully, touchingly, beautifully human. That's all it is.
And you're sort of answering the next question, which is to go.
I'm good at that.
Which is to go to the other side of that, the flip side of the coin, in that those moments where some actors call it when lightning strikes, when the rarest of the rare moment occurs, and every real actor knows when it happens, and it's so inexplicable. You can't explain where it comes from.
No, you can't, and I think there's an argument to be had. There's an argument to be said that there's an argument to be made. Terrible English. There's an argument to be made that you shouldn't examine it. You should let the mystery be.
Yeah.
Because it's so fleeting. I mean, there's that great story about Olivier when he was playing Othello, when the whole company knew that that lightning was striking that particular night. There was something going on. Nobody could put their finger on it, but there was something happening that hadn't happened before. And the word went round backstage, it's a hot one tonight. And by the end of the play, the actors who weren't on stage were all in the wings, watching. Curtain comes down, tumultuous applause. Olivier takes his bow, storms off, pushing his way out of everything, pushing his way through everyone. Everyone's trying to say, "Oh, brilliant! We won't have any of it." Goes into his dressing room, slams the door, and you can just hear him. This is the story Frank Finley told you. Screaming, knocking things over. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and everyone's kind of going, "What the fuck?" And finally, Frank, was playing Iago, was like his kind of buddy. He gets sent in to find out what's going on. He walks into Olivier's dressing room, and the place is like ripped apart. And Frank says, "Larry, what's wrong? What's wrong? It was brilliant tonight." And Larry apparently said, "I know, but I don't know why." And that's what was driving him nuts. He didn't know why. And that's another terribly human thing. It's we don't know. Frank Langella famously once said that the only contract that you buy a ticket to go and see a show. The actor's on stage. There's a contract. We've entered into a contract. You've put down money to see this, and I've turned up to give it to you. That's the contract, right? That's understood. No one in the audience ever really forgets that they're in a theatre with hundreds of other people. No one has that experience. It's as if it's as if I was in his front room. No, that never happens. Actors never lose themselves so completely that they think it's happening for real. If that happened, Othello would stab Desdemona and be in prison. If an actor truly believes that it's actually happening, he's not acting, he's a psychopath. There's always a part of us that's keeping an eye out on it, right? So we enter this contract, and Frank said, very interestingly, he said, the only obligation you have is to give the audience everything you've got that night. You can't pretend that somehow it's going to be better the next night, or that it won't be as good the next night, or somehow it was better the night before. You have to be there that night, and you give everything you've got that night. And that's a really kind of simple concept, but that's all you can do, and you don't know why. You could be exhausted. You might have had a row with someone. Some terrible things happened at home. You've had, I was doing a play when my mother died, and she was Italian, and so we had like an open casket, which is the traditional thing. And I was standing there at the head of the casket with my brother, and we had to just stand there while everyone came by and paid their respects. And my brother was absolutely falling apart, hanging on to me. I had my arm around him, and I was like holding it together. And I suddenly felt terribly ashamed, because as this was happening, I remember thinking, I must remember this feeling. This is going to be useful one day. And as soon as I had that thought, I felt so ashamed of myself. But the truth is, I did use it. And I've used it a few times. And if sense memory means anything, if all that stuff we study means anything, that's what that is. So everything we are as actors, I'm getting off the point a little bit, forgive me, but everything we are as actors, we sponge things up, and then you sponge it up, and then it becomes an offering. It starts off as an experience, then it becomes an offering in order to serve whatever it is you're doing, and that kind of makes it valid.
This thing that you're saying, don't want to analyze it at all. What hits me is that's our gift. That's what makes us different, because there are times when we go through hell, and that tiny little voice is our savior in that way.
Yeah, I think
It's like, wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it makes us different necessarily. I think it just makes us more. It makes us more accessible.
Human.
It makes it. It means we have. It's that gap. It's that little genetic flaw. It's that little gap in our genes. That's when my mother died, and I was thinking, I've got to remember this feeling. I was trying to fill that gap, and I knew it was going to be. It's part of me now. And she died, 30 odd years ago. And there's a kind, but I think it's part of what. I don't mean to bring this whole thing down.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
It's part of the joy of being an actor, that you can access this kind of stuff. That you can kind of go, yeah, that really shitty experience I had can now become something illuminating, something useful, something to enrich this experience.
Your mother would feel good that she's being remembered all the time.
Thank you. I like to think that. Can I tell you a story about my mother? My mother was crazy. I'll tell you a story about my mother. I was doing a play called Irish Eyes and English Tears at the Royal Court, and it was at the theatre upstairs. And the theatre upstairs was a bit like this, except the acting space was on the floor. So, the floor and the first row. And the second act of this play takes place on Brighton Beach. And all us actors, we're all young, we're all lying on the beach sunbathing. And my place on the stage happened to be right in front of my mother, where my mother was sitting. And, lights go down, we all come on stage, take our places, sound effects, birds, seagulls, ocean, lights come up, we're all on there in our swimming trunks, sunbathing, and on the back wall, 2 actors start the scene, and they've got the first 10-15 minutes of dialogue. We're all there lying there just sunbathing. So it's clear. Now my mother wasn't exactly well versed in theatrical conventions, but she had a nominal knowledge, a nominal understanding. The lights go down, things start. She kind of understood that. So the play continues. I'm lying there, and suddenly I hear, psst. Psst. Alfredo. And I'm just like, I'm like this. And I'm thinking, when I first heard the first psst, I thought, what's that? When I heard Alfredo, there was no psst. And I'm thinking, she'll shut up in a minute. She's going to realize. But no. Alfredo. Fredo, ma senti? Fredo, senti? I'm going, Jesus Christ. And then by now, people are kind of going, shh, like this. And I'm thinking, this is awful. And then she's going, Alfredo, Fredino, Fred. And I'm going, so I think if I just look at her, like really serious, like I'm pissed off, so I just went, and as I did that, she went, he's very good. That was my mum.
Tell the story about her running lines with you.
Oh, can I get away with that story?
Yeah.
There's a bit of bad language involved.
Oh,
All right. I was at the RSC and I was doing a play called That Good Between Us, and it was the first act opened with a really graphic rape scene. And I was one of 3 kind of skinheads, shaved heads. We were naked, and we pulled this girl out of a car. She's naked with her boyfriend in a car. We pull her out of the car. He's naked. We beat the shit out of him, and then there's this gang rape like really graphic. I mean, it was really hard to rehearse. It was very, very difficult. Patrick Stewart was in the play, Ian McDermott. But really, it was a really tough scene to rehearse and tough to do. And we did it every night to the sound of seats going. You never forget that sound. And so, but the dialogue is like really, it's like, get the fucking bitch out of the car, fuck that bitch, fuck you, you fucking cunt, bitch, fuck, piss, cunt, I mean, just everywhere. So I'm learning this thing, and my mother was in the habit of inviting me for dinner on Sundays, and she said, Fred, I don't see you for so long, you're so busy, come for lunch. I'm going, Mum, I can't, I'm working, no, but come, and I've got to learn my mind down, bring your script with you. I help you like I always help you when you were. Come on, I help you. I know you like to underline. I say the cue. So I can't get out of the lunch. So I go and I take my script. I think, well, she's going to see the play anyway, so she might as well. So we have this fantastic. I can't even remember what she made. We had this beautiful tomato salad, then we had lasagna, then she made this beautiful tiramisu. It just was a fantastic lunch. And she's not mentioning anything, so I'm thinking maybe she's forgotten. Right? And then we're having coffee, and we're just sitting there, and really enjoying a lunch. Then she goes, "Okay, where is your script?" I hand her the script, and she used to love doing this. She used to love helping me with my lines. She used to love it. And she used to get very kind of, she used to really enjoy the moment. So she'd go, "Okay, Act 1. No, That Good Between Us by Howard Barker, Act 1. Okay? Enter Tony, Jimmy, and Biff. Okay, I give you your cue. Pull the fucking bitch out of the car." So I go, fuck you, bitch. No, you got two fucks. It's fuck you fucking bitch. Okay, do it again. Get the fucking bitch out of the car. So, fuck you fucking bitch. Yes. Next line. I'm going to fuck you, you fucking cunt. And I'm going, what is it again? What is it? You say can't 3 times. This is like a 4-page scene. And it's all that. And we finally get through it. I'm like sweating buckets. And my mother's got her glasses on and she's like this, eyes like. And then she takes her glasses off and I'm not, I swear on my grandchildren's lives, this is absolutely true. She closes the script and she puts it down with great respect, and she goes, "You have to say all this?" I said, "Yeah." And she went, "And this is Royal Shakespeare Company?" And I said, "Yeah." And then she went, "But this is not Shakespeare, is it?" Oh my God. Absolutely true story.
I don't think you can top Mama. Wow. So before this night is over, there's a little award that Edith and Marie-Louise would like to come up and give to you. Yeah.
But I think they've gone home.
They've left the building.
Oh, good Lord.
Come on up here.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, I need my glasses. I need my reading glasses. Oh, brilliant. Do you guys know, are you students here?
Yes.
You must know this. I believe in the immortality of the theatre. It is the most joyous hideaway for all those who secretly put their childhood in their pocket. And went off and away to play further on to the end of their days. Beautiful, thank you. What a great night. What a great night. Thank you. I'm going to learn how to say that in the original German. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you so much.